April 16, 1945. A cellar beneath a ruined post office in the German town of Ebersheim. The air is thick with the ghosts of burnt paper and the damp, chalky smell of pulverized plaster. For 3 days, this has been the world for Anneliese Schmidt, a 20-year-old Nachrichtenhelferin, a signals auxiliary for the Luftwaffe. Above, the world has been ending in a symphony of thunder. The deep, guttural roar of American Sherman tanks grinding through the streets had replaced the familiar crack of German 88s. Now, an unnerving silence presses down, heavier than any artillery barrage. The dust motes dancing in the single beam of light from a crack in the ceiling seem to be the only things still moving in the universe. Anneliese clutches the thin wool of her gray-blue uniform jacket, her fingers tracing the lightning bolt insignia on her sleeve. It felt important once, a symbol of service, of connection to the pilots she guided with her radio plots. Now, it just feels like a target. Her friend, Ingrid, shifts beside her on an overturned ammunition crate. "They've stopped," she whispers, her voice raspy. "It's over." Ingrid has always been the pragmatist, her face already set in a mask of weary resignation. Anneliese wants to argue, to hold on to some sliver of defiance, but the truth is a cold weight in her stomach. They are out of ammunition, out of food, and, most importantly, out of orders. Their commanding officer, a weary, hollow-eyed Hauptmann whose left arm is in a sling of bloody rags, had made that clear an hour ago. They were a forgotten pocket of resistance in a war that had already rolled past them. The great machine of the Wehrmacht had crumbled, leaving them as isolated fragments. The silence is broken by a new sound, not the growl of an engine or the clatter of a machine gun, but the crunch of boots on rubble. Heavy, deliberate, and getting closer. Then a voice, loud and clear, in a language they have only heard in propaganda films. "Raus! Everybody out! Come and see Raus, now!" It's English, but mangled with a harsh, impatient accent. The cellar door, already splintered, is kicked open with a final, violent crack. A massive silhouette fills the frame, a helmet obscuring the face, a rifle held at the ready. For a heartbeat, no one moves. It's the paralyzing moment of surrender, the final breath of a dying cause. The Hauptmann rises slowly, painfully. He unbuckles his belt, letting his Luger pistol fall to the dusty floor with a dull thud. That is the signal. It is truly over. One by one, they file up the broken steps and into the blinding light of a late afternoon sun. Anneliese squints, her eyes watering. The destruction is absolute. Ebersheim is a skeleton of a town, its buildings gutted and blackened. And everywhere there are Americans. GIs in their olive drab uniforms, their faces smudged with dirt and fatigue. They look impossibly young, chewing gum, leaning against their Jeeps and M3 half-tracks. They carry their M1 Garins and Thompson submachine guns with a casual competence that is terrifying. Anneliese feels a blush of shame creep up her neck. These are the boys they were told were weak, undisciplined, decadent. They look like conquerors. A young soldier, his face covered in freckles, points his rifle towards a growing crowd of gray uniforms in the town square. "Get moving, mach schnell!" His voice isn't cruel, just tired. Anneliese and Ingrid join the shuffling column. They are surrounded by men from their unit, radio operators, anti-aircraft gunners, mechanics. All of them have the same look, a mixture of shock, humiliation, and a deep, soul-crushing weariness. The Americans herd them with an efficient, almost agricultural detachment, like ranchers moving livestock. The women, a small group of about 15 auxiliaries, cluster together instinctively. They are a strange island of blue-gray in a sea of Wehrmacht field gray. Anneliese keeps her head held high, a small, futile act of defiance. "We are not soldiers," she tells herself. "We are helpers. They will see that. They will process us and send us home." It is a fragile hope, a shield against the terrifying reality unfolding around her. The column begins its slow, shuffling march out of the ruins of Ebersheim, leaving behind the cellar that had been their last piece of a Germany that no longer existed. Their boots crunch on the gravel of a country road, each step taking them deeper into an unknown future, into the hands of their enemy. The sun is setting, casting long, distorted shadows that seem to claw at their heels. The road stretches on. What feels like hours of walking becomes a blur of rhythmic, shuffling sound, the scuff of 1,000 worn leather boots on dirt and stone. The initial shock gives way to a dull, aching fatigue that settles deep in Annaliese's bones. Her feet, protected by thin, service-issue shoes, are already beginning to blister. The cool air of the April evening does little to soothe the burning in her lungs. To their left and right, the German countryside is a panorama of serene devastation. Quaint farmhouses stand with their roofs blown in, ancient trees are splintered and blackened by shell fire, and in the fields, the carcasses of cattle lie bloated under the pale moon. It is a land that has been broken, and they, the shuffling column, are its broken people. As they march, their group merges with others. From side roads and forest paths, more columns of German soldiers appear, herded by a handful of American guards who seem almost overwhelmed by the sheer numbers. Soon, Anneliese is no longer in a column of a few hundred, but part of a vast, slow-moving river of gray uniforms. Men from the Heer, the Kriegsmarine, even a few older Volkssturm men in their mismatched civilian clothes. Their faces are all the same, blank, gaunt, and staring at nothing. The scale of the defeat is staggering. It's not just their small unit in Ebersheim that has fallen. It feels as if the entire German army is here, on this road, marching into oblivion. The Americans ride alongside the column in their jeeps, the canvas tops down, rifles resting across their laps. They rarely speak, only occasionally shouting an order to close the ranks or to pick up the pace. Sergeant Frank Rizzo of the 2nd Infantry Division watches the endless procession from the passenger seat of his Willys Jeep. His knuckles are white on the stock of his M1. He's been fighting his way across Europe since Normandy, and he has seen more German soldiers dead than he can count. Seeing them alive in these numbers is somehow more unnerving. It's a logistical nightmare. "Look at 'em, Lieutenant," he says to the young officer driving. "Where the hell are we supposed to put all of 'em?" The lieutenant just shakes his head, his eyes fixed on the road. "Eisenhower wants 'em off the battlefield, Sarge. That's all I know. We round 'em up and logistics takes 'em away." Rizzo chews on his unlit cigar. He's seen women in the columns before, nurses, administrative staff, but today there seems to be more. He spots the cluster of blue-gray uniforms, the women trying to maintain their formation, their faces a mixture of fear and pride. It makes him vaguely uncomfortable. This wasn't supposed to be part of the job description. Anneliese and Ingrid walk side by side, their shoulders occasionally bumping. They have stopped talking, conserving their energy. Anneliese focuses on the back of the woman in front of her, trying to block out the immensity of their situation. But she can't ignore the whispers that ripple through the column. Rumors fly like panicked birds. They are being taken to France. They are being shipped to America. The Russians are coming. The Americans are saving them from the Russians. No one knows anything. They are just driftwood on a tide they cannot control. "They have to separate us soon," Ingrid murmurs, her voice low. "They won't keep us with the men. It wouldn't be proper." Anneliese nods, clinging to that thought. It is a cornerstone of her belief in a world that still has rules, a world where women, even enemy women, are afforded a different kind of treatment. They are auxiliaries, after all, non-combatants. The Geneva Convention would surely apply differently to them. After what feels like an eternity, the terrain begins to change. The road crests a low hill, and laid out before them is a sight that makes the entire column falter. Under the bruised purple sky of dawn, a vast, sprawling city of wire spreads across the fields. It is not a camp of barracks and buildings. It is a series of enormous, open-air pens sectioned off by towering fences of barbed wire that glint menacingly in the first light. Wooden guard towers stand like skeletal sentinels at the corners. In the distance, smoke rises from a few makeshift fires, and the entire area seems to crawl with thousands upon thousands of figures. It is a human stockyard. A cold dread, far sharper and more real than the fear she felt in the cellar, begins to seep into Annalise's heart. This is their destination. This is not a processing center. This looks like a place people are sent to disappear. The river of gray slows as it approaches the main gate, the tired shuffling of boots replaced by a stunned, horrified silence. The entrance to the camp, designated POW Transient Enclosure A9, is a chaotic bottleneck of mud, vehicles, and humanity. The air is thick with the smell of diesel fumes, damp earth, and the faint, sour odor of unwashed bodies. American military police, identifiable by the white stripes on their helmets, shout orders through megaphones, their voices metallic and distorted. They work with a practiced, impersonal efficiency, breaking the massive column of prisoners into smaller, more manageable groups. Annalise feels a hand grab her arm, and she is pulled from the main flow, along with Ingrid and the other women. A corporal with a square jaw and weary eyes directs them towards a separate processing line. Females over here, Ausstellung. For a brief moment, Ingrid's prediction seems to be coming true. They are being separated. A flicker of relief passes through Annalise. This is it. They will be questioned, documented, and sent to a proper facility, perhaps a commandeered school or convent, not thrown into those dreadful open pens with the men. The processing is methodical and deeply humiliating. They are made to line up before a series of rickety wooden tables staffed by American clerks who look barely out of their teens. Name, rank, unit, a young soldier asks Annalise, his German clumsy but understandable. He doesn't look at her, his eyes focused on the form he is filling out. She gives her details, her voice small. Annalise Schmidt, Oberhelferin, Luftnachrichten Regiment 21. The American soldier frowns, struggling with the German words, before shrugging and scribbling something illegible. He gestures to a large cardboard box. Soldbuch, papers, anything with military insignia. Annalise hesitates. Her Soldbuch is her identity. It contains her photograph, her service record, her very existence within the German military structure. Giving it up feels like surrendering a piece of herself. The soldier looks up, his expression impatient. Now. Slowly, she retrieves the small, worn booklet and places it in the box on top of dozens of others. She is no longer Annalise Schmidt. She is a nameless prisoner, a number on a form. Next, a search. 2 female American soldiers, members of the Women's Army Corps, conduct the inspection. Their faces are stern, professional. They are not unkind, but their hands are firm as they pat down Annalise's uniform, check her pockets, and run their fingers through her hair. They confiscate a small pocket knife from one woman, a family photograph from another. Annalise has nothing but a handkerchief. The WWII gives a curt nod, and she is moved along. The entire process takes less than 5 minutes. It strips away their individuality, their rank, their past. They are now just a uniform, a category, female German POW. A wave of dizziness washes over Annalise as the reality of her powerlessness settles in. She is property now, her fate entirely in the hands of these strangers, these victors who see her not as a person, but as a piece of administrative work. Once processed, the small group of women is made to wait in a muddy holding area, watched over by a single guard. They can see the men from their unit going through a similar, though rougher, process before being marched off in large groups towards the massive sprawling enclosures that dominate the landscape. The pens are already hideously overcrowded. The men stand shoulder to shoulder on the bare, churned earth, with no shelter from the elements. There are no latrines, no buildings, nothing but the wire and the sky. A horrifying thought begins to form in Annalise, a thought she immediately tries to push away. Surely not. They wouldn't. They're probably taking us to the medical tent, Ingrid says, though her voice lacks conviction. Or maybe there's a barracks for women on the other side of the camp. They all nod, wanting to believe it, needing to believe it. After nearly an hour, an American sergeant approaches them. It is Frank Rizzo. He looks just as tired as he did on the road, a crumpled piece of paper in his hand. He avoids making eye contact with any of the women, instead speaking to their guard. "These are the females for C4. Let's move 'em." The guard nods. Rizzo turns to the women. "All right, you, follow me." His German is almost non-existent, but his gestures are clear enough. He leads them away from the main processing area, but not towards any building or tent. He leads them deeper into the wire-bound heart of the camp, paralleling one of the massive pens filled with male prisoners. The men stare out at them through the wire, their faces hollow, their eyes empty. Annalise feels 1,000 pairs of eyes on her back. She keeps her gaze fixed forward, on the sergeant's broad shoulders, her heart beginning to pound a frantic, heavy rhythm against her ribs. He is leading them toward another pen. It is smaller than the others, but it is identical in every other way. A rectangle of mud, surrounded by tall posts and a dense web of barbed wire. The pen designated C4 sits in a neglected corner of the vast enclosure, looking like an afterthought. The mud here is deeper, churned into a thick, sticky mire by the boots of a previous group of prisoners. There is nothing inside. No tent, no lean-to, not even a plank of wood to sit on. Just the unforgiving earth and the oppressive gray sky. The fence is at least 10 feet high, with thick wooden posts supporting the tautly stretched barbed wire. The gate is a crude but formidable barrier, a heavy frame of 2x4s covered in steel mesh and more wire, swinging on thick iron hinges. It looks less like a gate for people and more like something used to contain large, dangerous animals. Sergeant Rizzo stops before it, gesturing for another GI to unlock the chain that holds it shut. The clanking of the metal links is unnaturally loud in the tense silence. Annalise feels her feet root to the spot. A cold paralysis creeps up her legs. This cannot be right. This is a mistake. She looks at Ingrid, whose face has gone pale, her pragmatic composure finally cracking. The other women murmur nervously, their German whispers a flurry of confusion and disbelief. "Was ist das? What is this?" one of them asks, her voice trembling. "Here? Us? In here?" Rizzo pays them no mind. He is focused on the task, his expression unreadable. He shoves the heavy gate open, its bottom edge scraping through the mud with a deep, groaning sound. He turns and points into the pen. "Inside. Get in." The command is flat, devoid of emotion. It is simply an order to be followed. No one moves. They stand frozen, a small cluster of women in their worn uniforms, staring at the empty, muddy cage. It is a moment of collective, silent defiance, born not of courage, but of sheer incomprehension. The world, as they understood it, did not allow for this. They were signals auxiliaries, clerks, helpers. They operated switchboards and plotted aircraft movements. They were not frontline soldiers to be thrown into a muddy field behind barbed wire. A young corporal, impatient, steps forward and gives the woman at the front a firm push on the shoulder. "Geh hein, move it." The shove breaks the spell. The woman stumbles forward into the pen, nearly losing her footing in the mud. The others follow reluctantly, one by one, their movements stiff with shock. Annalise feels as though she is wading through water, each step a monumental effort. As she passes Rizzo, she meets his eyes for a fleeting second. She sees nothing there. No malice, no sympathy, just a profound, soul-crushing weariness. He is a man at the end of a long, dirty job, and they are just the last part of the cleanup. She steps over the threshold and into the pen. The mud sucks at her shoes. She turns back, watching as the last of the women, Ingrid, enters. They huddle together in the center of the enclosure, a small, pathetic flock, looking back at the open gate as if expecting a reprieve, an explanation, a correction to this terrible error. The two GIs, under Rizzo's supervision, begin to swing the heavy gate closed. The movement is slow, ponderous, final. It eclipses their view of the larger camp, replacing it with a grid of steel mesh. The women watch, their mouths agape, as the gate thuds heavily into its frame. There is a moment of stillness. The world seems to hold its breath. Then, Sergeant Rizzo takes a heavy iron bolt, slides it through the hasp on the gate on the post, and drops it into place. The sound it makes is not loud, but it is absolute. A solid, metallic clang that echoes in the damp air. A sound of finality. A sound that separates one world from another. The lock is fastened, the chain is wrapped and secured. They are inside. He has locked the door. For a long, stunned moment, the only sound is the wind whistling softly through the barbs of the wire. The women stare at the locked gate, their minds refusing to process what their eyes have just seen. The echo of the iron bolt sliding home hangs in the air, a metallic reverberation that seems to vibrate in Annalise's very bones. The world shrinks to the dimensions of this muddy pen, to the grid of wire that now stands between her and everything she has ever known. The GIs are turning away. Sergeant Rizzo doesn't even give them a backward glance. He pulls a crumpled pack of cigarettes from his pocket and offers one to the corporal. They are already moving on to their next task, their conversation about chow and getting some sleep drifting back to the women as they walk away. To them, the act was as mundane as closing a barn door. To the women inside, it was a cataclysm. It is Ingrid who speaks first, her voice a cracked whisper that cuts through the stunned silence. Why are we inside these cages? Her question is not directed at anyone in particular. It is a cry of bewilderment hurled at the indifferent sky, at the guards walking away, at the entire senseless universe of war. The question breaks the dam. A wave of panicked murmurs erupt. This is not right. We are not fee. We are not cattle. There must be a mistake. Tell them. One woman, a young signals operator from Berlin, rushes to the gate and grips the cold wire, her knuckles turning white. "Hallo, Sergeant, there is an error, ein Fehler," she screams, her voice high and strained. Rizzo does not stop. He doesn't even turn his head. He and the other soldiers just keep walking, their figures shrinking with distance, becoming just another part of the drab, sprawling camp. They are on the other side of the wire now, a different species. Annalise feels her knees buckle. The last fragile shield of her hope, the belief in order and propriety, has been utterly shattered by the simple, brutal sound of that lock. The Geneva Convention, their status as non-combatants, their gender. It was all meaningless, a fantasy. In the cold calculus of this war's end, they were simply enemy personnel, a number to be processed, a body to be contained. There was no distinction. The Wehrmacht soldier in the next pen, the SS trooper in another, and her, the Luftwaffe auxiliary, they were all the same now. They were prisoners. The realization lands with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. She looks around at the other women. The pride is gone from their faces, replaced by a creeping terror. The discipline that had held them together is dissolving into individual currents of fear and despair. She stumbles over to Ingrid, who is leaning against one of the thick wooden posts, her face buried in her hands. "They see no difference, Annalise," Ingrid sobs, her voice muffled, "between a soldier with a rifle and us with our headphones. To them, we are all just gray uniforms. We are the enemy." Annalise places a hand on her friend's shaking shoulder, but she can offer no words of comfort, for the same chilling truth has settled in her own soul. She looks through the wire, past the pen of silent staring men, to the American guards in their distant towers. They are just silhouettes now, faceless and remote.
They are not captors in the way she had imagined, not interrogators, not conquerors gloating over their prize. They are simply keepers, wardens of a vast open-air prison, and their job is to make sure the inmates stay inside. As dusk settles, a cold rain begins to fall. It starts as a fine mist, then thickens into a steady, miserable drizzle. There is nowhere to go, no shelter to seek. The mud becomes slicker, the air colder. Annalise pulls her thin jacket tighter, the damp wool offering little protection. She stands by the fence, her fingers curled loosely around the wire, feeling the cold steel and the sharp bite of the barbs. The rain plasters her hair to her forehead and trickles down her face like tears. She watches the camp lights flicker on in the distance, illuminating the endless lines of wire. Her life, the one where she was Annalise Schmidt, a daughter, a signals helper with a future, seems 1,000 years away. That person is gone. In her place is this creature of mud and wire, a prisoner in a cage, staring out at a world that has locked the door and walked away. The question is no longer why. The only question left is how long.